There are things he left me that don't fit in boxes. You can't pack a clenched jaw, or the way your voice catches before it breaks. You can't seal up the long pause between saying I'm fine and meaning it. These are the things he gave me, without words, without ceremony. Gifts sewn into the lining of my character. Stitches tight enough you forget they're there until they pull. I catch myself walking around problems instead of through them. I catch myself gripping doorknobs like I'm trying to measure the world's temperature through the meter. I hold my breath when people get too close. I say maybe when I mean yes, and it's nothing when I mean everything. I used to think these were just my traits. Now I see his handwriting on all of them. I remember the sound he made when he shifted his weight in the hall, that half-groan half-sigh that lived somewhere between his spine and his throat. I remember thinking it was the sound of age, but I'm not old yet, and I've started making the same sound when I rise from the floor. Inheritance isn't just blood and bone, it's breath and pause. It's the silence before a sentence that never comes. He never said I'm scared, but I think he was. Of what? I'm not sure. Maybe of being known too well. Maybe of needing things he couldn't name. He taught me to lock my emotions behind my teeth, and now I do so tightly that sometimes I forget I can open my mouth and let them out. When I speak now, I hear his cadence. Not in tone, but in tempo. The way he measured his words like they cost something. The way he'd let silence carry the weight when language failed. I've inherited that restraint, that stingy poetry. He left behind a drawer full of nails, screws, washers, tiny metallic bits of potential. I took them with me when I moved out. Not because I needed them, but because they reminded me of him. Small, sharp, capable of holding things together if used right. I keep them in a mason jar on a high shelf. Once in a while I shake it, just to hear the clink, like wind chimes built from discipline. He had this way of disappearing without leaving, of being in the room, but miles away. I used to try to pull him back, with jokes, with questions, with the stupid, clumsy love kids give without shame. Eventually I stopped. That might have been my first inheritance, the art of not reaching too far. Sometimes I think I should be angrier, that I should rage against the silence he handed down, like a family heirloom. But then I see my own hands when I'm anxious, the way they flex, the way they search for a task to do, a wire to strip, a thread to knot. His hands are my hands, and in them lives a kind of peace I can't explain. I remember once, I was maybe 13, I slammed the door after an argument, expected him to come after me, yell, demand an apology. Instead, he followed 20 minutes later, sat across from me in the garage, and started cleaning his tools. Didn't say a word, just passed me a rag when he was done. We wiped the sockets together, and that was our forgiveness. Now when someone hurts me, I clean. I scrub the sink until it shines. I sweep, I polish silver. I don't use. And when I'm done, I feel like I've spoken to someone. That's his voice in me, not in sound, but in motion, in rhythm. There's a space inside me that was carved in his shape, not because he filled it, but because he didn't. It's negative space, a silhouette in smoke, and everything I am has grown around it, like ivy curling up a frame that's no longer holding a picture. I think we inherit more than we realize. We inherit the way we flinch, the way we fold our arms, the way we answer phones on the second ring instead of the first, the way we say I don't mind when we mind very much. Sometimes I wonder what he inherited, what weight he carried from his father, what silences he was taught to hold, what rooms he never entered, because the memory of someone else's footsteps had claimed them. We don't talk about that kind of lineage. We talk about eye color, jawlines, height. But what about the invisible things, the wounds passed down like watches, the habits disguised as personality, the ghosts that teach us how to breathe before we learn how to speak? What I've inherited most from him, I think, is this: the quiet dignity of trying, not always succeeding, not always knowing how, but showing up, sitting still, holding the weight. Sometimes I tie my shoes slow just to hear the laces whisper, to remind myself that even silence has a sound. Some days he was thunder. Not loud, not the crash and scream kind, more the kind you feel before you hear. The pressure change in the room, the subtle heaviness behind the eyes, that strange awareness in your bones that something's about to shift. I'd walk into the kitchen and know by the way his shoulders curved inward, by the precise angle of his elbows on the table, that the air had turned. He never exploded. He condensed. He went inward, like clouds folding into themselves before the downpour. His storms were quiet, but they soaked everything. And me, I became a forecaster. I could predict him by scent. When he smelled like fresh sawdust and cedar, he was light. When he smelled metallic like old pennies or the faint tang of blood, it meant the sky was about to darken. When I was young, I thought I had powers. I thought reading him meant I was special. Later I realized it was just survival. Some days he was fog, not absent, just obscured. He'd sit in the living room with the TV glowing, but the sound off, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the screen. If I said his name, he'd turn like I'd spoken it from underwater. I learned not to disturb those days. I'd tiptoe around him, carry my silence like an offering, as if I could make peace with whatever ghosts he was hosting. The worst days were when he was both fog in the morning, thunder by dinner, and still I loved him. Or maybe I loved the hope of him, the way children do, the belief that the storm will pass, that the sky will clear, that maybe this time he'll explain what the clouds are hiding. I learned the weather of his face. The furrow in his brow meant wind. The twitch in his jaw meant lightning on the horizon. When he tapped his fingers against the armrest, I counted seconds like they were distance from a coming flash. And I prepared, always prepared. He never hit, never raised his voice, but his silence could unmake me. One withheld glance could unravel an entire day's worth of courage. I'd rehearse sentences before speaking, edit myself in real time. I became fluent in his moods, the way one becomes fluent in Morse code, painstakingly, patiently, and always under the threat of misunderstanding. I think he wanted to protect me in his own way. I think he knew he was a barometric force. I think that's why he kept himself wrapped in routine. Same breakfast every morning, same shirt every Monday, same boots, same shoelaces, tied the same way, like he was anchoring the world to the ground. But the weather still came, and sometimes it didn't just soak us, it stayed, hung around, molded into the wallpaper, settled in the grain of the wood. Years later I still track storms, not the kind you see on radar, the kind you feel in a partner's breath, in the pause after a question, in the way someone says nothing when they mean everything, and I still carry an umbrella in my chest. Sometimes I think love in our house was just another word for barometer. It measured pressure, but didn't change it. It warned us of the shifts, but never prevented them. We lived under a weather system no one acknowledged, and like any child raised under a volatile sky, I grew up worshipping the sun, but expecting rain. I wish I could say I learned to break the cycle, but I didn't. I carry storms inside me now. I go quiet when I'm overwhelmed. I disappear when I'm hurt. I let people guess instead of ask. I learned from the best. But I also learned this. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is open the windows, let the fog in, let it touch your skin without shrinking from it. Say its name. He never did. But I'm trying. I tie my shoes slowly on gray morning. I breathe deeper when the pressure drops. I speak even when my throat tightens. I forecast my own moods now, not to warn others, but to tell myself it's okay to rain. Some things don't stop happening just because they're over. His leaving didn't end. It extended like light in a tunnel that refuses to dim. His absence didn't take a single shape. It was elastic. It stretched into rooms he'd never stood in. Years after his boots stopped appearing by the door, I thought it would dull. It didn't. It refined itself. I hear him in the soft complaint of rusted hinges, in the tap of my fingers on a countertop, while I wait for water to boil. In the space between knocking and opening the door, I hear him in every stretched silence, every echo that doesn't bounce back. I moved apartments 3 times in 5 years. New walls, new ceilings, new corners that never quite learned how to hold my voice. But every space eventually began to hum with him, like his absence traveled with me, folded in my luggage. Not a ghost, not a haunting, more like a soundtrack you forget is playing until it's skipped. There's a certain kind of loneliness that doesn't ask for company, it asks for familiarity. I found it in drawer handles that stuck, in light bulbs that flickered once before holding steady, in shirts I never wore, just hung, for balance. When I was 26, I found myself in a small kitchen, rearranging silverware the way he used to, forks to the left, spoons stacked, not side by side, knives facing inward. I didn't know I remembered, but my hands did. Muscle memory is its own kind of inheritance. And grief, it turns out, teaches the body as much as the heart. I once stood outside a hardware store staring at a display of work gloves, big, leather-palmed, the kind that smelled like effort. I stared for 10 minutes, maybe longer. I didn't buy them, I didn't need them, but for those 10 minutes, I wasn't outside a store. I was back in the garage, watching him rub his thumbs into the seams of a pair just like them, muttering to himself like the gloves had to earn their place. Sometimes I wonder, is remembering him my choice, or just something my life does when it isn't paying attention? He echoes most when I'm trying to be strong, when someone I love is breaking and I don't know what to say. That's when I feel him standing behind me, not guiding, not comforting, just present. Like he's there to see if I'll do it differently, if I'll speak, if I'll reach, if I'll become the man I wished he had been, even as I still carry the shape of who he was. I've become fluent in the sounds he never made, the things he didn't say. They rattle like loose change in the pocket of my personality. I can feel them with every step, and there's guilt too, a quiet guilt, not that I failed him, but that I kept moving, that I lived in spite of the pause he left behind. I laugh, I love, I sleep through storms now, and part of me wonders if that's betrayal or survival. I still check my shoelaces twice before leaving the house. Loop, pull, tap tap tap. I don't need to, but I do, because somewhere in the repetition, I find a voice that isn't mine, whispering, "You're still tethered, you're still walking." That's what he left me with, an echo, not the booming kind, not a scream, just a soft returning note that never fully fades. I hear it in stairwells, in parking lots at dusk, in the click of a light switch when I'm alone. Some people say closure is a door you walk through. I think it's a hallway you keep revisiting, hoping the echo sounds a little different each time. And even now, I listen. I still expect to hear him. He left with no goodbye, no note, no final cigarette, burned down to a stubborn ember on the porch railing, just gone, like breath in winter, like the last second of a song when the silence feels too clean. I didn't know you could leave someone like that, and still haunt every doorway. Now every time I walk out of a room, any room, I wonder what part of me I'm forgetting to carry with me. What I'm leaving behind for someone else to stare at. A cup still warm, a jacket still slung, a sentence half spoken. Maybe that's how it starts. Maybe that's how we all become ghosts to someone. When I'm saying goodbye now, I overdo it. I hug too long. I touch backs, shoulders, elbows. I linger like I'm trying to prove I still exist. I write texts I don't send. I rehearse what I'd say if I had one more minute. I make noise, keys jangling, shoes tapping, because silence makes me think someone's about to disappear. I think I do this because I don't trust doors anymore. He taught me that you can leave without leaving a sound, and it's still loud, deafening. The absence of footsteps is sometimes heavier than the presence of boots. When someone I love walks away, even just to grab coffee, I watch them a little too long, part of me waiting to be proven wrong, part of me holding my breath, like his breath still lives inside me, refusing to exhale. I remember being a kid standing at the top of the stairs, hearing the front door open and close, that soft thud. I remember thinking, he'll be back in a second. Then the clock hands moved, and moved, and moved. The house adjusted around his absence, like it had been expecting. I waited until the house stopped creaking, until the shadows settled. Then I sat on the top step and tied my shoes. Just tied them, not to go anywhere, just to feel like I had something to hold. Every time I leave someone now, I think about him. I think about the parts of him that cracked off like glacier shelves. How many versions of him lived inside those silences, and how many versions of me grew around them like scar tissue. And every time I stay, I wonder if I'm him in reverse, if staying is my rebellion, my proof that legacies can be rewritten in softer handwriting. If I can be a door that doesn't close. I don't always get it right. I've left people too, not with a slam, with a sigh, with a drift, with words like I just need time and this isn't about you, which is true, but also because every echo needs a wall to bounce off, and I've become a wall more times than I like to admit. I inherited his stillness, his hesitation, but I'm learning to use them differently. When someone is hurting, I don't vanish. I stay quiet beside them. I hold their hand, even if I don't know what to say. I say I'm not going anywhere, even when part of me wants to run. That's how I know I'm not him, but also how I know he's still with me. Because to change the story, you have to know the story. You have to carry it long enough to feel where it digs into your shoulders. You have to know the sound of the door before you learn how to keep it open. So I stay. Even when it's hard, even when I'm tired, even when silence stretches out like a road that dares me to leave, because he learned I won't. I used to think it was just a habit, that the way he bent his knee, crossed his foot over,
looped and pulled and tugged and tapped. It was just a way to keep his boots from slipping off. A functional thing, a rhythm built from repetition. But now I understand. Every knot was a prayer with no language, a gesture against unraveling. He tied his shoes like it was the last thing he had control over. Like if he got the loops right, maybe the day would hold, maybe the silence wouldn't crush him, maybe love wouldn't leave bruises where it pressed too long, without speaking. I never asked why he did it that way. I never asked why he tapped his toes 3 times, even when we were late, especially when we were late. There was something sacred about it, like those 3 taps kept him tethered to the earth, like they kept him from floating away. He didn't believe in God, not the way churches wanted him to, but I think those knots were his form of faith. Faith in patterns, in little ritual, in doing something the same way every time, so that even when the world turned sideways, his shoes stayed tied. When he left, I sat on my bed and tied mine the same way, slowly. 1 loop, cross, pull, tight, tap, tap, tap. I was 17. The loops didn't come out right the first time, but the taps did. They always do. They echo. And now, years later, I still do it, every morning, even if I'm running late, even if I'm wearing sneakers with no real laces, even if I'm barefoot, metaphorically or literally. I tie and untie in my mind, a mental muscle twitch, a rhythm I need to feel whole, because what he gave me wasn't comfort, or guidance, or warmth. He gave me a ritual, and sometimes, that's more enduring. I think now about how many things we do in silence, hoping someone notices, hoping it says what our mouths. The knot was his way of speaking, not to me, not at first, but to himself, to the part of him that still believed in showing up, that still believed in staying put. I want to believe he was trying, that he wasn't just surviving, but trying to teach me how to. He never said he loved me, but he tapped his boots 3 times before walking out the door. Maybe that was his way. I used to hate the sound, so deliberate, so unnecessary, but now it's what I remember most. That soft rhythm on the hardwood floor. Tap, tap, tap. A message, a promise, or maybe just a way to say, I'm still here. I carry that sound with me, in the quiet before I speak, in the moment before I enter a room, in the seconds between taking a breath and letting it go. It's how I hold him now, not with anger, not even with grief, but with repetition. Loop, knot, pull, tap, tap, tap. And every time I rise, I do it slowly, like it hurts to leave the earth behind, just like he.
I remember the sound of his breath more than I remember his voice. Not the words. Those come and go like names of flowers I've half learned and always forget, but the breath beneath them, the weight of it, how it seemed to rise from somewhere ancient inside him, a slow exhale like the world was too heavy for his ribs. That's how I remember my father. Autumn. Always autumn. The season memory clings to. My earliest recollection is of sitting on the cracked front steps of our old house, leaves skittering across the pavement like they were trying to run from something. I must have been 4, maybe 5. I was watching him tie his shoes. He always knelt when he did it. Left knee down, right foot crossed over, back bent just enough to make his spine creak. That moment, the slow lacing of brown leather boots felt like watching a spell being cast. He didn't tie them like other dads. There was this ceremony to it. 1 loop, twist, another loop. A tug that felt final, like closing a door. He'd tug just hard enough for the laces to sigh. Then he'd tap each toe on the ground 3 times, always 3, and rise like it hurt to leave the earth behind. He never explained it. I never asked. Looking back, I think that's how I loved him first. Not through hugs or bedtime stories. He wasn't that kind of father, but in the way he made a ritual out of the mundane, the way he gave weight to repetition. I learned his patterns before I learned his language. He was not a man of explanations. He was a man of rhythm. There's a photograph tucked into the back of one of my sketchbooks. I don't show it to anyone. In it, I'm sitting beside him, mimicking his posture, my tiny fists pulling imaginary laces taut. He isn't looking at the camera. He rarely did. His eyes are fixed on my hands. Not with a smile, not with pride, just presence. That was all he could ever give me, really. Presence like a storm cloud. Heavy, quiet. The way he tied his shoes was the way he did everything. Deliberate, weighted, a bit too slow. I hated it when I got older. Hated how it made us late for church or school or the movies. I'd tap my foot and sigh, and sometimes snap. Jesus, Dad, it's just shoes. He never answered, just kept tying. That silent, stubborn, stoic, infuriating, is the thread that runs through every chapter of our story. He had a way of being there without touching anything. He could stand in the middle of the living room and somehow not disturb the air. I used to wonder if he was born like that, or if life carved it into him. His hands always looked like they were bracing for impact, veins like riverbed, skin weathered, not by labor, but by restraint. There's a memory I can't shake. A summer storm. I must have been 11. Lightning lit up the walls like ghosts. I ran into his room without thinking, heart hammering. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, shirtless, hunched over his boots, tying them, at midnight, in the dark, like he was waiting for something to come through the walls. He looked up when I opened the door, just one glance, then back down at his hands. "You afraid?" he asked. I nodded. He said nothing else, just scooted over on the bed, made room. I sat beside him. We listened to the storm. I watched his hands. That was the night I realized he tied his shoes when he didn't know what else to do, like it anchored him. I picked up the habit, still do it sometimes. Tie and untie, loop and tug. Not to wear them, just to feel the weight of something repeating. Some days it's the only thing that keeps my pulse from floating away. I don't remember the last time I heard his voice, not the real one, the one he used when he didn't think he was being listened to. Low, gravelly, a little too soft for a man his size. I wonder if he whispered to himself the way I do, if he carried echoes in his chest. There are things I'll never ask him, not because I don't want to know, but because he built walls out of his silences, and I was too afraid to climb them. I remember the sound of his breath when he slept, like he was apologizing with every inhale. I remember the smell of his shirts, faint sweat and something metallic, old pennies maybe, or the inside of a drawer that's been closed too long. I remember the way he stood at the kitchen sink, not washing dishes, just standing, as if the sink held some truth he couldn't face, and always the way he tied his shoes. It's a strange thing how the smallest rituals bury themselves inside you, how the rhythm of another person's habits becomes your heartbeat. I keep his boots now, polished leather, cracked at the heel, laces stiff with old grief. I don't wear them, just tie and untie. 3 taps on the toe, rise slow. Sometimes I wonder what kind of man I might have become if he'd ever said he loved me. Other times I think, maybe he did, in the only way he knew how. I don't know if that makes it better, but I do know this. He tied his shoes like it was the last thing keeping him, and maybe in the end it was. There was no goodbye, not really. Just the morning sun slipping sideways through the blinds and the silence where his truck should have been. I remember the smell first. His absence smelled like engine oil cooling on the driveway, like the stale smoke of something that had already burned. The box was in the hall closet, tucked behind winter coats and an old vacuum that never worked right. No, just a plain cardboard box, the flaps torn and soft at the edges like they'd been opened and closed too many times. He left it there like an unfinished sentence. Inside matches, a pocket knife, a faded postcard, and the shirt he wore the day he left. That blue flannel one, the one with the worn cuffs and missing button near the collar. I don't know why I remember that shirt so well. Maybe because it was the last thing I touched that still felt like him, still smelled like him. Pine sap and sweat and something faintly medicinal, like cough drops he never let dissolve all the way. I sat on the floor and spread the things out like puzzle pieces. I was 17, too old to cry the way I did, too young to make sense of grief. The postcard was addressed to no one, just an image of a cabin near Lake Superior, no writing, no stamp. I flipped it over and over until the edges frayed beneath my thumb. Did he mean to send it, or was it a dream he never mailed out? The matches were the long kind, kitchen matches, the ones you strike against your thigh if you're trying to look like you've got something to prove. He wasn't a smoker, not really, but he always kept matches around, lit candles when the power went out, lit the stove even when the clicker worked, said lighters felt like cheating. The pocket knife was old, heavy, black handle blade dull with time. I remember it lived in the top drawer of his dresser, beside his watch and a key I never found the lock to. He used it for everything, peeling oranges, opening letters, carving notches into the fence post out back, one for every birthday, mine, not his. I still run my fingers along those notches when I visit, 13 shallow grooves in the wood. The 14th never came. He left before that. I didn't burn the shirt, though I wanted to. I held it over the sink once, matches in hand. the fabric trembling like it knew, but I couldn't do it. Couldn't set fire to the last thing that still remembered the shape of his body. Some things burn, some don't, but everything leaves a smell behind. That shirt, it's in a plastic bag now, zipped up tight in the back of my closet. I tell myself it's so the scent doesn't fade, but maybe it's because I'm afraid it already has. Grief has a smell, you know. It's not rot, not real. It's more like old paper and dust and something sweet left too long in the sun. It's the smell of the back of your father's closet when you open it and he isn't there. I carry the knife now, not for protection, just to have something of his weight in my pocket. Something solid, something that makes noise when it hits the table. I never sharpen it. That feels like rewriting him. Sometimes I strike one of the matches, let it burn down to my fingers before I blow it out. Not for light, just for the smell, just for the way the flame flickers like it's trying to speak. I've read the postcard 1,000 times. Still blank, still that same cabin, snow-dusted and alone. I want to believe it's where he went, that he found a place where the air is clean and no one needs him to explain anything. But more often, I think he left it to me as a question, a challenge, a dare. Come find me maybe, or worse, stay lost like me. Sometimes when I'm tying my shoes, I catch myself tapping the toes 3 times, and I wonder, was he trying to teach me something with all those small, strange acts? Was he leaving breadcrumbs he hoped I'd one day follow? Or was he just doing what he knew? The box still sits under my bed. I don't open it much, not because it hurts, but because it doesn't. And that scares me more. There was an art to the way he crouched in front of something broken. Chin tilted, hands on his knees like he was listening to the damage. He didn't rush, didn't mutter frustrations under his breath. He just sat with the brokenness, like it was a language he understood better than English. The first thing I ever watched him fix was the screen door. The mesh had come loose in one corner, curling in like a peeled scab. He didn't replace the whole screen though I think most people would have. Instead he found a roll of wire, a needle from his tackle box, and he stitching screen to frame like it was a wound that needed mending, not replacing. I remember the thread glinting in the late light, a silver scar. He could fix chairs, radios, the hinges on the front gate that groaned like they hadn't been spoken to in years. He once rebuilt the engine of a neighbor's motorcycle just because she looked sad pushing it down the road. But he couldn't fix people. Not really. He couldn't fix the silence in our kitchen after my mother left. Couldn't patch the tear in my voice when I asked where she'd gone. He just passed the salt. That was his answer. Salt. Practical. Heavy. Almost biblical. When I was 10, I dropped a glass. I watched it fall in slow motion, shards spinning like galaxies across the tile. I watched his face, not the floor. Watched for flinching. There wasn't any. Just a sigh. The slow kneel and his hands sweeping sharp edges into a pile. I broke another one the next week. On purpose. I told myself it slipped, but I knew. I wanted to see if he'd get angry, if he'd yell, if he'd finally look me in the eyes and ask why. He didn't. Just got the bruise. That night, I asked him if everything could be fixed. He didn't look at me, just said, if it matters enough. I wanted to ask, did I? But I didn't, because I already knew the answer, or thought I did. He fixed things with his hands, not his heart. Maybe he didn't know how, or maybe he thought fixing one meant breaking the other. There was an old radio in the garage, big, boxy, smelling of dust and forgotten summers. He'd spend hours bent over its guts, wires splayed like veins. He said he liked the crackle between stations, said it reminded him that the world was full of voices, even if we couldn't hear them all. Sometimes, I think that's how he saw me, as a station he couldn't quite tune into, too much static, not enough signal. I kept the radio. It still doesn't work right, but I like the way it hums when you twist the dial, like it's trying, like it wants to. There's a chair in my apartment, one leg shorter than the rest. I never fix it. I like the way it rocks unevenly, makes me feel like he's still around, in the little imperfection, in the way things lean, but don't fall. Once when I was 14, I cut my hand trying to pry open a paint can, deep slice across my palm. I bled all over the floor, panicked, cried. He didn't rush, just got a rag, the bottle of rubbing alcohol, and sat me down. He didn't say, it's okay, didn't ask, are you all right? He cleaned the wound, wrapped it, tight, but not too tight. Then he said, hold it above your heart. I did. I think about that a lot, how he never gave comfort, just instructions. But maybe, in that moment, that was his version of love. I carry that scar still. It's faint, but I can find it when I need to, like a bookmark in a story I don't read anymore.
Now when things break, I try to fix them, not because I think everything can be mended, but because it feels like a way to speak to him, to keep learning his language. Even now, I still wonder what might have cracked in him, that no one tried to fix, what sharp edges he learned to hold without bleeding. Some nights I sit with the radio on low, just static. I imagine his breath on the other end of it, heavy, rhythmic, like a man lacing up his boots one last time. And I think, maybe we're all just trying to fix the sound of someone walking away. He never told me how to be a man. Not once did he say those words, the ones you see in movies, the tearful monologues, at bedsides, or over baseball gloves. He didn't do speeches, didn't believe in declaration. What he gave me instead was something quieter, something that lived in pauses, and in the way he moved through the house like he didn't want to wake it. He taught by existing, that's all. There was a way he would pause in doorways, like he wasn't sure if he was entering or leaving, like he was weighing the gravity of presence. I never understood that as a kid. I just thought he forgot things, but now I think it was his way of not overwhelming the space. He'd been taught somewhere along the line that men take up too much room, so he tried not to. He never told me not to cry. He just didn't. I'd cry at the table, at the sink, sometimes into my sleeves in the living room while cartoons buzzed in the background, and he'd just stay where he was, not looking away, not reaching forward. Just there, like a fence post you don't notice until you're leaning on it. The first time I shaved, it wasn't an event. He didn't stand beside me in the mirror, no towel tossed over his shoulder, no smile, but the razor was there, his placed beside the sink, fresh blade, can of shaving cream turned just slightly toward me, like an offering, like a breadcrumb. I used it, cut my chin twice, wiped the blood with toilet paper. I left the razor where I found it. The next day it was gone. Lesson given. Lesson received, no words exchanged. He didn't knock before entering my room, but he never barged in either. Just a soft push of the door, a glance to make sure I wasn't doing anything I'd hate being seen doing. Then he'd linger in the doorway, maybe comment on the weather, maybe not. Then he'd walk away, but I noticed, even when he turned his back, he never really left the room. There was a tether, invisible but taut, between the door and the silence he left behind. He taught me how to wait, taught me that some answers don't come right away, and some never do. When my bike chain broke, he didn't fix it for me. He left the tools in the driveway, in a neat line, sat on the steps, sipping something dark from a mason jar, said nothing, just watched. When I got frustrated and threw the wrench, he didn't flinch, just said try again. I did, because I wanted to be seen trying. He taught me the power of stillness, of not filling every silence with noise. I used to think that meant he didn't care, but now I wonder if it was his way of showing respect, of giving space for me to become whoever I was trying to be. When I told him I wanted to leave home after high school, to go far, he didn't object, just nodded. He didn't help me, but he left a flashlight and a pocket map on the passenger seat of my car, taped a note to the dashboard. Headlights go out sometimes, roads don't. That was the closest he ever came to saying he believed in me. He taught me that love doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's a thing that sits in the corner and watches to make sure the walls don't fall. Now I catch myself teaching in the same way, to people I love, through presence, through silence, through showing up and not leaving. Even when I have nothing to offer, I leave things in places people will find them. A folded sweater, a filled kettle, a note scribbled with a grocery list that ends with don't forget to eat. And I wonder if they know. I wonder if they see the lessons I'm trying to leave behind, or if they'll only understand them years later, like I do now. Sometimes I still stand in doorways unsure whether to enter or leave, and sometimes I tie my shoes extra slow, like I'm teaching someone somewhere how to stay when it's easier to go. After he left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt off, misshapen, tilted, like everything had leaned against him without realizing it, and now the whole place drooped, trying to remember how to stand upright alone. Not quiet, never quiet. There was too much leftover noise, his boots thudding down the hallway in memory, the groan of his chair even when it wasn't sat in, the whisper of his shirts in the closet. Though most of them were gone, absence, I've come to understand, isn't silence. It's noise that can't find its source, echoes that don't know what they're answering. The refrigerator still hummed, but the hum seemed confused. The kitchen faucet still dripped, but each drop felt like a question it couldn't phrase properly. I didn't sleep those first weeks, not because I missed him in the way people mean when they say they miss someone, but because the air felt unbalanced, like a wind always turning corners that didn't exist. I'd walk the rooms at night, barefoot, careful, like a thief stealing memories from floorboards. I'd find myself standing in front of his tools, or the empty chair by the window, or the hallway mirror where he used to adjust his collar. I never turned on the lights. Maybe I thought the dark would be gentler with what was left. His smell lingered the longest. Not the strong scent from before, oiled sweat, old flannel, but the faded kind that clung to doorknobs and pillowcases, the kind that tricked you into thinking they might still be coming back. That scent followed me like a question. What? I tried to clean once, just once. I pulled everything out from under the bed, found a sock that wasn't mine, a pen cap, a paperclip bent into a shape I couldn't decipher, little fossils, proof he had once sat where I was now sitting. I started vacuuming. Got halfway through the living room before I had to sit down and breathe like I'd run a mile uphill. The vacuum sat out for 3 days after that. I left his chair untouched for weeks. Then I tried to sit in it. It didn't fit. It wasn't a size thing, it was a gravity thing. The seat held his weight like a memory. My body didn't know how to echo his posture. I sat forward, then leaned back, then tried folding one leg under. Nothing worked. It rejected me, politely. So I stood. That's how I mourned him, standing where he used to sit. People kept asking if I was okay. I said yes, that was easier. I said, he wasn't really the talking type. And people nodded like that explained everything. Maybe it did. I didn't cry the day he left. I didn't cry the day after, either. I cried in the middle of a grocery store, 3 weeks later, standing in front of the peanut butter, a jar with a green lid. The one he always bought. I hadn't even meant to pick it up, but I did. Held it in both hands and felt my throat tighten like someone had looped a shoelace around it. I put it back on the shelf, carefully, as if it were made of bone. That's how grief works sometimes. It doesn't hit you in the big moments. It waits. It hides in the ordinary. In peanut butter, in a bootlace, in the quiet click of a lamp turning off. His absence rearranged the furniture of my life, not literally, but in the way I navigated it. I started sitting on the floor more often, stopped using the dining table, ate standing up. I don't know why, maybe because he'd always made things feel formal, even the little things, and now nothing felt like it deserved a seat. There are dents in the hardwood by the door where his boots used to rest. They're still there. I've never covered them. Some part of me thinks that as long as the floor remembers, maybe I won't have to hold it all myself. One night I dreamed I heard him in the hallway, not his voice, just the sound of him, that weight, that hush, the way he used to clear his throat once before speaking, even when he didn't end up saying anything. I woke up reaching for the doorknob, and I waited, not for him, but for something, some kind of noise I could follow back to the beginning. But the only sound was the heat kicking on, and the wind, brushing the windows like it had lost something it wasn't supposed to let go of.